Good evening, students. Can you hear me? Okay. So, in the previous class, we stopped with discussion of the general characters of bryophytes, correct? So, now today we'll talk about classification of bryophytes. Now, in the textbook, only two groups of bryophytes have been mentioned by the names liverworts and mosses. Okay. Now, the actual classification of bryophytes consists of three different classes, which are class Hepaticopsida. These are the technical names of them. Okay, so class Hepaticopsida, class Anthoceratopsida, and class Bryopsida. So, out of this, what we will be studying is only number 1 and 3. Number 2 is not included for you, so we'll skip that, but just know the name. Okay, so this is also one group among bryophytes. So, class Hepaticopsida, commonly called liverworts, and the example is Rixia and Markensia. And class Anthoceratopsida. So, over there, they are commonly called hornworts, and example is Anthoceros. And then class Bryopsida, they are commonly called mosses, and the example is Funaria, Polytrichum, and Sphagnum. Okay, so these are the three different classes of bryophytes. Now we'll talk about them one by one. Okay, starting with class Hepaticopsida. Now, liverworts, these, now the place where they are normally found, that is all same to how you will normally find bryophytes. Okay, so they usually grow in moist, shaded habitats, damp soil, damp tree barks, and usually on compound walls, anywhere where there is a damp environment. Usually bryophytes flourish during rainy season. Okay, so anywhere where there is a damp environment, they will flourish. Why? Because bryophytes require water for fertilization, correct? They're otherwise known as amphibians of plant kingdom. So usually they'll flourish during rainy season and they will grow well in damp environments. And then the plant body of liverworts is thalloid. Thalloid is, it is not properly differentiated into true roots, stems, and leaves. Okay, plant body is thalloid and dorsiventral. What does dorsiventral mean? The plant body can be differentiated clearly into a dorsal surface and a ventral surface. Dorsal and ventral surface can be clearly distinguished, and the plants grow closely pressed to the substrate. What does that mean? They grow closely pressed, meaning they grow very close or parallel to the substratum. They grow parallel to the substratum and they are anchored to the substratum by means of rhizoids. Okay, which means attached to the substratum by means of root-like structures called rhizoids. Okay, so this is about in general the plant body. Okay, so they grow closely pressed and it is thalloid. So a diagram of liverworts is given in your textbook. It looks kind of something like this. Okay, it's a lobed thallus, and it looks like this. Okay, and this is the dorsal surface, what you see. Now under this there will be, so let's say over here we have the ventral surface from which there will be tiny root-like structures called rhizoids arising. Okay, so rhizoids will arise all around the undersurface of the substratum and they will attach the thallus to the substratum. Okay, so this is a thalloid plant body, lobed thallus. Sometimes leafy members are present, leaf like appendages are present in two rows on a stem like structure. So this is one particular form called porella. Okay, leaf like structure. Example, we see this in case of a member called porella. Now over here what happens is there is the thallus that is leafy, so it won't be like this thalloid, it will have very tiny and minute leaf like structures. So this will be present again, growing parallel to the substratum only again. Okay, so there is no difference in that particular point where it grows parallel to the substratum, it's not growing vertically upwards or anything. Okay, so it will be branched and many leaf like structures will be present like this, and there will be rhizoids growing from underneath this. Okay, so this is in case of porella and it will be found all around like this. Clear? So this is about the general plant body of bryophytes. Is so much clear now? Can we move on to the next segment in this? All right, moving on. We'll now talk about asexual reproduction. Now in case of liverworts, asexual reproduction happens by means of something called gemmae, structures called gemmae. So it can also happen by fragmentation of thallus. Okay, that is in general. Fragmentation of thallus is a very common method of asexual reproduction, but there is one specific method of reproduction called gemmae. Now these gemmae are specialized structures which are green, multicellular, asexual buds. Okay, so gemmae are specialized green, multicellular and asexual buds that develop on receptacle like structures called gemma cups. Gemma cups. Okay, so basically on the thallus, let's say if this is the thallus, there will be a cup shaped structure which is called the gemma cup or receptacle. Now on the cup shaped structure there will be development of a tiny but multicellular structure called gemma. Now what happens once this starts developing and it is mature enough, this part will detach from the thallus and it will grow into a new liverwort thallus, either Rixia or Markinsia. Okay, so it develops into a new gametophytic thallus. Is this clear? So this is about asexual reproduction. Now talking about sexual reproduction. Now we've already discussed.
Um,
Pardon?
those gemma,
Yeah.
are they're not spores, are they?
No, no, they're not spores. They're simple vegetative structures. That's all. Not spores.
So from that, the bud will, it will bud and it will grow.
It itself is a bud. It's a multicellular bud. Okay.
So
Gem.
it undergoes mitosis from the
No,
next.
no, nothing. Yes, from the gametophytic thallus, it develops by cell division,
Okay.
and it simply grows into a new thallus. That's all. So there is no meiosis taking place. Like you said, mitosis, yes. So sexual reproduction happens by formation of gametes. So there is formation of specific male reproductive organ. What is the male reproductive organ called?
And 3D.
Yes, antheridium. And the female reproductive organ, which is archegonium. Now, these antheridia and archegonia can be present on the same thallus, or they can be present on different thalli. Basically, it is like in case of Markensia, let's say. This is the antheridium. Okay. In Markensia, now the diagram is given. This is the male thallus, where this is the antheridium, and over here this part has been labeled as the antheridiophore. Antheridiophore, which means it is the stalk that bears the antheridium. Okay. So usually in case of Rixia, one single thallus will have both antheridium as well as archegonium. Okay. So that is one type. But sometimes in case of Markensia thallus will have only either antheridium or archegonium. So it depends on the kind of organism that we're talking about. The different types of bryophytes, they can either have both antheridium and archegonium in one single thallus, or it can be present in two different thalli. So this is the male thallus of Markensia, where the antheridium is present specifically on a stalk-like structure called the antheridiophore. Phore refers to the stalk that bears the antheridium. So at the tip there is the antheridium. Okay. Same way archegonium will be present, except in that case we call it the archegonium and archegoniophore. So in case of a female thallus, it has the archegonium and archegoniophore. Okay. So this is how the reproductive organs are present in case of liverworts. And now we have already discussed how fertilization happens, right, in case of bryophytes. So how does that happen? The
During the
antheridium
rainy
produce,
season,
yeah, during rainy season,
the female
yeah,
gamete will mature in
antheridium
their
will produce what kind of gamete? Male gamete. What is it called?
I
Anthrozoid, male gamete, right?
no, but you have given something like antheridial. Uh, I can't even read. Okay, 1 minute.
Yeah. So antheridium will produce anthrozooids. Anthrozoid is the name that we give for the male gamete. Okay. Any confusions?
Yeah, antheridial, any
Initial. Okay. So
initial, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
antheridial initial is nothing but I just explained the
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. I
structure
see.
of the antheridium. Okay.
And the dot
So
dot like structure.
yeah, exactly. So it's
Yeah,
like a tennis bat shaped structure. There's an outer jacket layer inside which there will be cells like this present, tiny cells, each of which we call antheridial initial, which means a cell with the potential to develop into an anthrozoid. That's all. It's just an immature anthrozoid. That's all. Okay. So each of these cells on maturity will develop into an anthrozoid. Clear? So what happens once these cells are mature? They will simply turn into thousands of anthrozoids, curved structure with two flagella. Okay, there will be two flagella present. So the anthrozoid is biflagellate. It's biflagellate. It has two flagella like this. Okay, and then the archegonium produces the female gamete, which is the egg cell. Okay, so now these will undergo fertilization. After fertilization, they form, now this is haploid and this is haploid. So they form the diploid zygote after fertilization. So the zygote is diploid. Now what happens after this process? After fertilization, the zygote will immediately undergo
mitotic
meiosis. The zygote undergoes meiosis and I'm sorry, the zygote,
division.
mitosis. The zygote undergoes mitosis and it starts forming the,
Sporophytic generation.
yes, the diploid sporophytic plant body. So the sporophyte again is diploid and it's going to contain what? A capsule with spores in it. Okay, so the sporophyte consists of a capsule that will produce haploid spores inside of it. So once the spores are mature enough, the spores will be released and the released spores will give back the gametophytic plant body of bryophytes. Is this clear? So the spores will germinate to produce the gametophyte back. Okay, so this is the process of fertilization in case of liverworts. Is this clear? So this is about liverworts in general, and the examples of liverworts are Rixia and Markensia. Okay, Rixia and Markensia are examples of liverworts. Okay, now is so much clear? Can we move to the next topic, mosses? Okay, all right. So now,
You're skipping the second one now.
yes, because that entire thing is not there in your textbook. It's not required anyway. Just gave you the name of it. That's all. The name and the example you can remember.
I didn't write it down. Could you just?
Ah, the second class is class Anthocercida. Hornworts, commonly called hornworts. Example, Anthoceros. All right. So can we move to the next one? Class Bryopsida. Okay. commonly called mosses. Now, mosses over here, the predominant stage is the gametophyte. Now, the gametophyte in moss consists of two distinct stages. One is the
No, no. The
yeah
last, the earlier one, so Catalicopsida. Its
uh,
main generation is gametophyte or sporophyte.
it's gametophyte only. In bryophytes, it is gametophyte. Any bryophyte you take, the main plant body is a gametophyte. Okay, all bryophytes.
But after zygote formation, it
Hmm.
undergoes mitotic division to give the sporophytic generation.
Yes, the sporophytic generation. But the sporophytic generation is partially dependent on the gametophyte for its nutrition, right?
Yes.
So the main plant body is gametophyte only. The sporophyte is partially dependent on the gametophyte. Okay. So now, in case of class Bryopsida, the gametophyte phase is actually divided into two stages. The first stage is called the protonema stage, juvenile protonema stage, and then comes the adult stage, which is the leafy stage. Okay, so there is a juvenile or initial first protonema stage, and then the second leafy stage. Okay, so what is the protonema? It is branched filamentous green cells. It's a filamentous thallus, kind of like your algae. Okay, filamentous and creeping on the substratum. So it's a filamentous branched and also multicellular. So it looks something like this. So it's just a linear chain of cells. Sometimes it could be branched like this. Okay. And sometimes it can get cut up here and there, and it will exist as primary and secondary protonema, all that. Okay. So protonema is a creeping green branched and multicellular filamentous stage. Okay, this is the initial or immature phase of the gametophyte. Now from this protonema stage, the adult leafy stage arises by budding from the secondary protonema. So, lateral buds will develop on either sides, tiny bud like structures will develop from the protonema, and these buds will then grow vertically upwards to form the leafy stage. Okay, so let's see what the leafy stage looks like. So, this part is the capsule, this is seta, this is foot, leaves, then central stem like structure, and these are the rhizoids. So together this forms gametophyte, and This part forms the sporophyte. Clear? So this is the representation of mosses, liverworts. Now in this case, the stark difference between mosses and liverworts is that liverworts grow closely oppressed to the substratum, whereas mosses grow vertically upwards from the substratum. They're not creeping or prostrate. Okay, that is the difference. Liverworts are prostrate, meaning they grow parallel to the substratum, whereas your mosses, they grow vertically upwards from the substratum. Okay, so there is a distinct root like, stem like and leaf like structure. Still it is thalloid. Okay, they're not true roots, stems and leaves. So root like, stem like and leaf like structures, and they grow vertically upwards from the thallus, and there is production of a sporophyte from it. Is this clear? Okay, so yeah,
Could you just repeat that they are not fully thalloid?
they're not actual root, stems and leaves, no, because they do not have
They don't have
xylem and
the.
phloem. They do not have xylem and phloem, so we call that root like, stem like and leaf like structures. They're not true roots, stems and leaves. Okay,
And they don't grow oppressed like liverwort.
no, they're not grow, yeah, they don't grow oppressed to the substratum.
Rather, they are prostrate, as in
ah Liverworts are prostrate.
these grow vertically.
Yes, bryophytes grow vertically upwards. All right, so let's now talk about the thallus in detail. Okay, now, like I said, the gametophytic thallus has rhizoids that are multicellular. So it's got multicellular rhizoids and minute leaves arranged spirally on a central stem-like axis. Okay, so this is how the gametophytic thallus is present. Now talking about asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction happens by fragmentation and budding, but both of these forms are in the protonema, okay, not in the actual leafy thallus. So asexual reproduction happens by fragmentation of protonema and budding of protonema. So the protonemal cells can get cut here and there, and each thallus will develop into a new leafy thallus. Budding of protonema, on either sides primary and lateral buds can develop, and from each bud there will be production of more thalli. Okay, so asexual reproduction or vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation and budding of protonema. Now, talking about sexual reproduction. So, sexual reproduction, like I said, same antheridium and archegonium
No,
will be
no.
produced. Yeah.
For the protonema,
Uh,
after the buds are formed, it forms the leafy stage. As in leafy stage is formed due to budding
yes.
of protonema. Okay.
Mm. So, sexual reproduction happens by antheridia, where antheridia are born at the tip of the leafy branches. So this gametophytic thallus, the leafy thallus can actually be branched also. Okay, so each branch at its tip will have the antheridium or archegonium. So antheridia and archegonia, basically sex organs, are born at the tip of leafy branches, and after fertilization, the zygote forms the sporophyte. So in this case, the sporophyte is divided into three distinct parts. What are they? The basal foot and an elongated seta and a large capsule. This basal foot helps in anchorage of the sporophyte to the gametophyte. So the foot is the part through which the sporophyte is attached to the gametophyte. Now the gametophyte is partially dependent on the sporophyte, okay, which means it's capable of photosynthesis, but still nutrients it will absorb from the gametophyte, okay. And then this seta is elongated. It's the elongated part that brings it well above the gametophytic thallus for spore disposal. And then comes the capsule. So the capsule is a large structure that contains spores. Now this capsule will consist of sporogenous tissue, which after meiosis will produce spores. Now the special feature about mosses is that it has an elaborate spore dispersal mechanism. Elaborate spore dispersal mechanism, meaning it is capable of discharging spores actively. So what happens, this capsule, there is a tiny part of it which will break open, and the spores that are present inside the capsule will be flicked out like this, okay. So the spore dispersal mechanism is quite special in case of mosses, okay. So that is elaborate spore dispersal mechanism. And common examples of mosses are Funaria, Polytrichum and Sphagnum. Clear? So this is about class Bryopsida. Is so much clear? Classification of bryophytes, liverworts and mosses. Alright, next we'll move on to importance of bryophytes. Now, bryophytes are of little economic importance, meaning the use of bryophytes in daily life is not much. Little economic importance, meaning some mosses, some bryophytes serve as food for herbivores. So there are some mosses that are eaten as food by some herbivores like deer and all of that. So usually in case of places with freezing temperatures where the vegetation is scanty, there are certain mosses that are eaten by deer, okay. So some bryophytes serve as food for herbivores, and there is one specific moss called sphagnum, okay. Sphagnum, which has a high water holding capacity. So what happens, because it has high water holding capacity, its sponge like nature allows it to be used as packing material in the transshipment of living material. So it's used as packing material, meaning like how we use thermocol to ship stuff from one place to another. Sphagnum, because it is spongy and it has high water holding capacity, it is drenched with water and it is wrapped around living material. For example, if plants have to be shipped from one place to another, they will usually be wrapped in a little bit of sphagnum so that it is kept in a cool condition. Okay, so that is use of sphagnum as packing material for shipment of living materials. Okay, so this is one economic importance. And another use of sphagnum is that it provides something called peat, cocoa peat, coal peat. You might have heard it's a source of fuel. Okay, so fossilized forms of sphagnum, they usually turn into coal, peat coal it is called. Okay, so that is a source of fuel. So that is from sphagnum. Okay, so this is about the economic importance of bryophytes. Clear? So it is of little economic importance, but it is of great ecological importance. What does that mean? So in an ecosystem, the role played by bryophytes is quite huge. Okay, it is of great ecological importance, meaning along with lichens, bryophytes are first colonizers of rocks. They are the first colonizers of bare rock, meaning a bare rock is not usually a surface for growth of living organisms, right? But lichens will grow on rocks, and along with that, bryophytes can also grow on rocks slightly. And what happens over a period of time, this continuous growth and decay of bryophytes as well as lichens on the rock will slowly soften it, and after some point, it helps in the weathering of rock. It contributes to weathering of rock and thereby formation of soil. So you get my point? Rocks will undergo weathering. It is a very gradual process, right? So they undergo weathering and produce soil. So these bryophytes, by continuous habitation on bare rocks, they will help in weathering process of rocks. So that is one ecological importance. So they help in decomposing rocks. So they help in decomposing rocks and thereby formation of soil. And then one more ecological importance is that mosses grow as dense mats. They grow as dense mats on the soil surface, which means they will cover a large area of the soil and hold the soil by means of its rhizoids, which means it serves as protection, no? From what? It serves as protection from soil erosion, wind and water erosion. So it acts as a binding agent of soil, holding it. So it will grow as dense mats on large soil surfaces, and they will hold the soil, preventing it from getting eroded by wind or water. Okay, so this is one more great ecological importance of bryophytes. So bryophytes are of little economic importance but great ecological importance. Clear? All right, now next we'll move on to the next group of plants called pteridophytes. Now pteridophytes go by many common names. Okay, They can be called horsetails or ferns. So basically ferns is the widely accepted common name of pteridophytes. Okay. So talking about the general use of pteridophytes, they can be used as ornamentals. Okay. Ferns sorry, ferns generally are used as ornamentals, and some ferns are medicinal, and some ferns also grow as soil binders, like how you saw bryophytes, no, how they grow as soil binders. So they can be used as soil binders also. And evolutionarily speaking, pteridophytes were the first land plants to develop vasculature, which is vascular tissues like xylem and phloem. Okay, so evolutionarily, pteridophytes were the first land plants to evolve or develop vascular tissues like xylem and phloem. So up until now, in algae and bryophytes, we did not see the presence of xylem and phloem, but this has that. Okay, pteridophytes are the first plants to have xylem and phloem. And where are they usually found? Again, they're found in cool and shaded regions, but sometimes they can also flourish well in sandy soil too. Okay, so they prefer cool and shaded regions, sometimes damp also, but some can also flourish well in sandy soil. Okay, so this is in general about where we find pteridophytes. And here the dominant plant body is a diploid sporophyte. So as opposed to bryophytes, the dominant plant body here is a diploid sporophyte. Is this clear? So the plant body produces spores and not gametes. So the actual plant body is the diploid sporophyte. Now let's see how the sporophyte is, the external appearance of the sporophyte. So in pteridophytes, the sporophyte is divided into true roots, stems and leaves. Is this clear? True roots. Why do we call them true roots, stems and leaves? Because they possess well differentiated vascular tissues. Okay, so actual xylem and phloem are found. So it is differentiated into true roots, stems and leaves. And the stem is usually reduced to a rhizome. Okay, it's usually underground, and what is predominantly found on the pteridophyte is leaves only. Okay, now the leaves can be of two types. They could either be microphylls, that is tiny minute leaves. So depending on the size of the leaves, pteridophytes can be microphylls or macrophylls. So microphylls are tiny minute leaves, as seen in case of members like Selaginella. Selaginella is one pteridophyte where the leaves are very tiny. Okay, so those are microphylls. Then we have macrophylls, where large leaves are present. Okay, the leaves are very large. Example, usually ferns will show very large leaf. And when we say large leaves, usually they are compound leaves, pinnately compound leaves. Okay, they are pinnately compound leaves, which means they will look like this. So there is a central rachis from which leaves will be present like this. So this is a pinnately compound leaf. This entire thing is considered to be one leaf, hence we call them macrophylls. Okay. So large leaves are present in case of ferns. Is this clear? So microphylls and macrophylls. Now talking about what the sporophyte contains. So as the name indicates, the sporophyte consists of spores, correct? The sporophyte should produce spores. Now the sporophyte produces spores inside sac-like structures called sporangia. Okay. Sporophyte produces spores inside sporangia. Sporangia is a sac-like structure. Sporangium singular, sporangia plural. Okay. So what happens is the sporangium looks like this, and it is subtended by a leaf-like appendage which is called the sporophyll. Sporophyll is the leaf that bears the sporangium. Okay, the leaf that bears the sporangium is called the sporophyll. And so there's the central axis like this, and on either side it will have the sporophyll. So on this side there will be another sporangium. So inside this sporangium there will be spores present. Is this clear? So this is how it is present. Now many such sporophylls with sporangia will be compactly arranged. Now this is an enlarged structure. It actually will not be this expanded. Okay, they will be very compactly arranged into a compact structure which looks kind of like this. Okay, compact structure called the strobilus or cone. Okay, strobilus or cones are compact structures that bear spores. Okay, strobilus singular, strobili plural. Okay, compact structures that bear sporangia with the spores. Okay, so this is about the sporangium. Now inside this sporangium, how does the spore get produced? There are spore mother cells that will undergo meiosis to form spores. Okay, so the strobilus will contain sporangia. Inside the sporangium there will be spore mother cell which undergoes meiosis to form spores. Is this clear? Now the strobili are usually present in case of Selaginella and equisetum. Okay, these are examples of forms where strobili are present. Strobili are not present in all pteridophytes. Okay, they're only present in a select few pteridophytes. Otherwise the sporangia will simply be present under the leaves. Strobili are present specifically in case of pteridophytes like Selaginella and equisetum. Alright, now talking about what the spores do. The spores are haploid, and once they germinate, what will they form? The spores germinate to produce the gametophyte, correct? The spores will germinate to produce gametophyte. Now the gametophyte over here, see, look at the difference between bryophyte and pteridophyte. The gametophyte is a free living structure mostly, okay? It is not dependent on the sporophyte at all, mostly free living, and it is a tiny inconspicuous structure. Now in case of bryophytes, how was it? Both both the gametophyte and the sporophyte were clearly visible, correct? In case of mosses I'm talking about, both gametophyte as well as sporophyte were clearly visible, and they were both properly represented by multicellular plant bodies. And the sporophyte was dependent on the gametophyte partially for nutrition, correct? But that is not the case in pteridophytes, okay? So let's see what the gametophyte is like in pteridophytes. The gametophyte in pteridophyte is a small but multicellular. It's a small but multicellular, inconspicuous. Inconspicuous meaning not very well noticed, okay? Inconspicuous, free living, mostly photosynthetic, which means it's capable of taking care of its own nutrition, okay? Mostly photosynthetic, thalloid gametophyte. So it's a thalloid structure called prothallus. So please remember, in case of pteridophytes, the gametophyte develops from the spores. The spores get released from the sporophytic plant body. Once the spores fall on the ground, they germinate to produce small but multicellular, inconspicuous, not very well seen, okay? They're usually inconspicuous, free living, and mostly photosynthetic. They're not dependent on the sporophyte. They're mostly photosynthetic. They can take care of their own nutrition. Thalloid structure, not differentiated into proper structures. It's thalloid and kind of irregularly shaped, okay? So it is
Are
thalloid
they
and
microscopic?
pardon?
Are they microscopic?
Kind of microscopic because they are inconspicuous, okay? Multicellular but yet microscopic, not macroscopic, because you cannot really see them. So inconspicuous, okay? So thalloid, not fully developed into structures, and it is called a prothallus, okay? The gametophyte of a pteridophyte is called a prothallus. Now these
So it
prothallus,
doesn't have vasculature, no?
no, it doesn't have vasculature. It's a very simple structure. It's and short lived also, okay? So it prefers cool, damp regions because it requires water for fertilization. So it requires water for fertilization, and hence it prefers such cool and damp regions. And this is the reason why the distribution of pteridophytes is quite limited, okay? So because these gametophytes are very picky in where they grow, there is limited distribution. Limited distribution of pteridophytes, okay? Now what does the prothallus contain? The prothallus consists of Antheridium. It consists of the male and female reproductive organ. This prothallus is basically the gametophyte, right? It has to produce gametes. So for the production of gametes, it has antheridium and archegonium. Okay. It's a very tiny structure with both antheridium and archegonium present. Now here comes the difference. Now see, I said pteridophytes produce spores, right? Pteridophytes produce spores. Now these spores can be either only of one type or they can be of two types. Okay. Accordingly, pteridophytes can be called homosporous or heterosporous. Homosporous pteridophytes produce only one kind of spore. Meaning,
Can you speak a minute?
yeah, pardon?
In pteridophytes,
Mm,
when they are having the entire life cycle, so
mm,
it goes from sperm, or sorry, it goes from spores,
mm.
germinates into gametophyte, and then from gametophyte, which is the prothallus, it undergoes fertilization and becomes sporophyte again.
Yes, yes, that is how
Okay.
it happens. But let me explain the fertilization process later. But first, before we even talk about the Antheridium and Archegonium, I just wanted to say this because I'll connect it later to the prothallus. Okay.
This spore which is there is present in the strobulus.
Yes, the spore is present inside the strobilus. Okay. So the spores will get released from the sporangium and they will fall onto the substratum and develop into the prothallus. Correct. Now,
Yes.
before I talk about how the prothallus will have antheridium and archegonium, this is just one thing I want to say. Spores can either be homosporous, which means the pteridophyte will produce only one type of spore. Okay, only one type of spore, homospores. Okay, so only one kind of spores. Example, this is seen in case of equisetum. Equisetum will produce only one type of spore. Such a spore will develop into a bisexual prothallus. Bisexual meaning monoecious, meaning this spore, when it develops into a prothallus, it will have both antheridium and archegonium, which means it is bisexual, male and female both together will be present. Okay, a homosporous pteridophyte will produce only one kind of spore, and that spore on germination will produce a prothallus that is monoecious, meaning it is bisexual. Both antheridium and archegonium will be present on the same prothallus. Clear? Is this
No.
clear?
So
Yeah.
the spores are of two types, homosporous and
And heterosporous.
so in
In
homosporous,
case only one type of spores are produced,
okay.
there is only one spore. There is no differentiation in the type of spore. Okay,
Now,
all
how can it be
spores.
differentiated? As in the spore itself, we are differentiating into two, which is homosporous and heterosporous.
No, pteridophytes are homosporous and heterosporous pteridophytes.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, so a homosporous pteridophyte will produce all spores that look similar. Only one type of
Okay.
spore it has. Okay, so any of that spore, when it germinates into a prothallus, it will produce bisexual prothallus, which means antheridium and archegonium present on the same prothallus. Okay, now coming to the second type of pteridophyte. This is important. Heterosporous pteridophytes. Heterosporous pteridophytes. Example, Selaginella and Salvinia. Remember, Selaginella and Salvinia are heterosporous. They produce two kinds of spores. Number one, microspores, that are small, small spores, and megaspores, that are larger. Okay. So these microspores are generally considered to be male spores and megaspores are considered to be female spores. So basically what happens when this microspore germinates into a prothallus, it forms the male prothallus that has only antheridium. Okay. The male prothallus that contains only antheridium, whereas the megaspore germinates into a female prothallus that contains only archegonium. Clear? So there is difference in the type of prothallus also. Now coming to the process of fertilization, now that is pretty much the same. Okay, the antheridium will produce anthrozooids, male gametes. Archegonium will produce egg cell. They will undergo fertilization and there is going to be formation of a zygote, and the zygote will develop into the sporophyte. Is this clear? The process of fertilization is the same. Now comes an important topic under this called seed habit. Now you know that after pteridophytes comes another group of plants called gymnosperms, where seeds start to get formed first, right? So these pteridophytes are seedless plants. Your algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes do not produce seeds, right? Whereas gymnosperms produce seeds. But the first step, the evolutionary step in the production of seeded plants was actually done by pteridophytes. How? In heterosporous pteridophytes like
The
Selaginella.
seed habit is the next concept, right?
Yes, next concept. Yeah.
The Pteridophyta was over with the fertilization, the general fertilization.
It's one part under pteridophyte only. Okay.
Oh,
Seed of habit is a part under pteridophyte because it paves the way for the evolution of the next set of plants called gymnosperms, okay, which are seeded plants. Okay, so the seed habit is a concept where in heterosporous pteridophytes like Selaginella and Salvinia, okay, in heterosporous pteridophytes like Selaginella and Salvinia, the female gametophyte is retained on the parent sporophyte for variable periods of time. For variable periods. And what happens? The development of the zygote into embryo takes place within the gametophyte. So this event is a precursor to something called the seed habit. Okay. See, now carefully listen. In heterosporous pteridophytes, the female gametophyte, which means the female prothallus. That is why I was explaining how in heterosporous pteridophytes, the male microspore will develop into the male prothallus and the megaspore will develop into the female gametophyte or female prothallus. Now, usually the spore will be released and the gametophyte will be produced on the soil. But sometimes, in specific cases of pteridophytes like Selaginella and Salvinia, what happens is the female gametophyte is retained, which means it is not released. It is retained on the parent sporophyte for variable periods. I'm not saying it will be retained indefinitely. It is retained for a small period of time during which there is development of the zygote into embryo. Okay, so fertilization, zygote developing into embryo takes place within the gametophyte. This is actually a precursor, meaning the first step. So usually in case of gymnosperms and angiosperms, what happens? Let's take the specific case of angiosperm, where even in angiosperm, the main plant body is the sporophyte, correct? Yeah. So over there, we have flowers, correct? Now flowers have pollen grains. Pollen grains are considered to be male gametes, no? Now, those gametes are released, but the gametophyte pollen grain is not released immediately, no? It is retained on the parent sporophyte itself. And
Uh,
look at how the female gametophyte. What is the female gametophyte in angiosperms? Within the ovule, we have the embryo sac, right?
yeah,
Which contains the 7-celled 8-nucleate structure. Now, that is retained indefinitely on the sporophyte, yes?
yes,
It never leaves the sporophyte at all. But in this case, it leaves the sporophyte, correct? In pteridophytes, the female gametophyte leaves the sporophyte. But in case of heterosporous pteridophytes like Selaginella and Salvinia, the female gametophyte is retained on the parent sporophyte for variable periods. For some time, it gets retained, which means this is the first step towards the evolution of a seeded plant. Okay,
so
the
that means
retention.
in angiosperm, the
Mm,
formation of fruit is due to the female reproductive organ being left behind, as in the
yes,
ovary
yes,
and all. That's what
y-
turns into the flesh.
yes.
And the anther, as in the
Mm.
stamen, is as in it just falls off.
Yeah, that gets released. No, pollen grains have to be released anyway because
Again,
for
the release
fertilizer.
and it falls on the style, or
Mm,
yeah, it falls on the style, and
mm,
then the anther after fertilization falls off.
yeah.
So that's the same thing here. I
No,
think
here I'm talking about the female
similar.
gametophyte. Female gametophyte.
Female gamete.
Yeah. So the female gametophyte is retained indefinitely in case of angiosperms. No, in gymnosperms and angiosperms, the female gametophyte is never released out of the sporophyte. Okay,
Yeah,
unless and until it forms the seed, it never leaves the sporophyte at all, right?
but the female gametophyte is the
Embryo
reproductive organ.
sac, embryo sac in case of angiosperms. Okay.
But how is it a gametophyte now? As in the gametophyte is generally referring to the body form. That
Not necessarily. That is another difference. Okay. Now, in this case, in pteridophytes and bryophytes, the gametophyte is actually a plant body, right?
oh,
It's a multicellular plant body. Whereas in angiosperms and gymnosperms, it is not a plant body, but a few celled structure. That is all. It's not represented by a different plant body. Clear?
so the entire generally the entire plant body is a sporophyte. But
Yes,
in
this
that
plant body is a sporophyte. In
is
that, a
oh,
tiny part is the gametophyte, not a gametophytic plant body at all.
only because it is producing gametes. As in that
Yes,
small part is producing gametes.
yes, yes. Okay, so this is the difference. So in this case, in case of pteridophytes, the gametophyte is separate from the sporophyte, but yet it is an inconspicuous structure and it is retained on the parent sporophyte for variable periods. Clear?
And also here also it is the same. As in heterosporous pteridophytes. Pteridophytes are
Only
generally
in
sporophytes.
heterosporous pteridophytes.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
in heterosporous pteridophytes are generally sporophytes, as in they're sporophytes in
Pardon?
total, as in their entire body form is
Uh,
sporophyte.
yeah, the main plant body is a sporophyte, no doubt.
Within that, just like how in angiosperms there is gametophyte, which is that few cells, like that
Uh,
only the female gametophyte.
yes, this is the female gametophyte here, except this is independent from the sporophyte. Okay, there it is never independent from the sporophyte. In angiosperms, the gametophyte is never independent from the sporophyte at all. Okay, entirely dependent on the sporophyte.
And the female gametophyte is formed by the megaspore from
Hmm.
the heterosporous pteridophyte.
Yes.
That megaspore is on the body form itself or it's released generally.
In pteridophytes, it is released eventually. Okay,
No, no,
so it
not
is in.
released eventually.
Uh,
When that megaspore is formed
mm,
from the pteridophyte,
mm,
does it release, and that megaspore, is it
mm.
released on the body form itself or it's a separate entity which is released to some
Normally,
medium?
in most pteridophytes, the megaspore is released entirely from out of the sporophyte. It falls on the soil, and
And then
there
becomes becomes.
germinates into the female gametophyte. Okay.
So how does the female gametophyte and the male gametophyte, as in
Mm.
both will be released, and
Yeah.
both of them will meet, and then fertilization will occur.
Yes. Yes. Because
So
they'll be in close proximity to each other,
okay,
so
and
they will
here
still require water for fertilization. So because they're in
so
close proximity to each other,
uh,
even then they will require water for fertilization.
so it's a biflagellated anthozoid,
Pardon?
as in
Yes, yes, still biflagellated
oh,
anthrozooids here. Okay,
okay,
okay. So this is seed habit, where the female gametophyte is retained on the parent sporophyte for variable periods, but later it gets released, and hence there is formation of the sporophyte eventually later on. Okay, so this step is considered to be the precursor to seed habit, which was the first step in the evolution of seeded plants, which is later gymnosperms. Okay, so this is what laid the first step for the evolution of seeded plants, which is gymnosperms and angiosperms. Clear? Okay, so this is about seed habit. Now with this we complete pteridophytes. Now talking about classification of pteridophytes. So we have four classes of pteridophytes. Class Xylophyta. The first group is Xylophyta. Example, Xylotum. Number two is Lycophyta. Example, Lycopodium and Selaginella. And number three, sorry, this is actually Psilopsida. Okay, in some places it's Xylophyta. Write it as Psilopsida, Lycopsida, Sphenopsida. Example, Equisetum. And then finally, Pteropsida. Example, Pteris, Bryopteris, and Adiantum. So these are different examples of pteridophytes that belong to different classes. Okay.
Are we going to study them in detail or?
No, no, no. Only the examples, classes and the examples. That's all. Okay. So, Psilopsida, the most basic group of pteridophytes. Example, Psilotum. Lycopsida, Lycopodium and Selaginella. And then we have Sphenopsida, which is Equisetum, which interestingly happens to be the only living member of this class, meaning class Sphenopsida consists of mostly fossil pteridophytes. Okay, all pteridophytes that have become extinct and only fossil members exist now. But Equisetum is considered to be a living fossil. It's considered to be a living fossil, which means it has pretty much not undergone any changes right from then. Okay, so it's considered to be a living fossil, only one living member. Okay, then Pteropsida.
Psilopsida and Lycopsida are already extinct. As in
No, no,
only.
no. All of these are still living. Only Sphenopsida I'm talking about. Members of Sphenopsida are generally extinct, but Equisetum is the only living member there. Okay, so we call them living fossils. And then Pteropsida. So members of Pteropsida are what we commonly call ferns. They're very ornamental, beautiful to look at. And we have Pteris, Dryopteris and Adiantum. Adiantum is commonly called the maiden hair fern. Maiden hair fern, because the stem looks kind of black in color, so we call it the maiden hair fern. Okay, so this is about classification of pteridophytes. Is this clear? Yeah, all right. And one more piece of information here. We were talking about this particular form called Salvinia, right? Salvinia is aquatic. Okay, aquatic pteridophyte. This is one more. Yeah, all right. So with this, we complete pteridophytes. Now, can we move on to the next topic, which is gymnosperms? Yeah. Now, gymnosperms are commonly called naked seeded plants. Okay. Gymnosperms are naked seeded plants, meaning the seeds are not covered by fruits. Seeds are not enclosed within fruits, as opposed to your angiosperms where seeds are enclosed by fruits, correct? That is because the ovules are not enclosed by ovary wall. So, the seeds or the ovules, both before fertilization and after fertilization, the seeds and the ovules are not covered by an ovary wall or a fruit wall. So, before fertilization, the ovules are not enclosed by ovary walls. Therefore, after fertilization, the seeds are not covered by fruits. Hence, we call them naked seeded plants. Is this clear? Then, again, in gymnosperms, the main plant body is a diploid sporophyte. It's a diploid sporophyte, and the plant body of gymnosperms, they include medium sized to very tall trees.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I think this is applicable for the last two also. When you say diploid sporophyte, it means
Uh,
that the spores formed are diploid.
no, spores formed are haploid. Sporophytic plant body is diploid. By meiosis, it produces spores.
So the somatic cells are diploid.
Somatic cells are diploid.
Okay.
Hmm? Okay. All right. So the plant body of gymnosperms, like I said, it's a sporophyte, and the plant body can vary from small shrubs. They can be small shrubby plants to medium sized to very tall trees. Okay, and the tallest tree is a gymnosperm, which is called sequoia, the giant redwood tree. The giant redwood tree, which is sequoia, this is the tallest tree in the entire plant kingdom. The tallest tree is sequoia, which happens to be a gymnosperm, which is the giant redwood tree. Okay, so this is about the size range of gymnosperms. Now, talking about the plant body, how it is. The plant body is differentiated into true roots, stems, and leaves. Now, the root is generally a taproot system. Roots are generally taproots, and in case of a gymnosperm called cycas, it has something called coralloid roots. Okay, the presence of something called coralloid roots. Now, these coralloid roots are pale, irregularly shaped, negatively geotropic roots. Neg-
Cycus is a plant, no? I mean,
Pardon?
the cycus is an organism.
Cycas is an organism, which is gymnosperm. Cycas is one gymnosperm. Okay. So, in case of cycas, in addition to the already existing root system, there are extra specialized roots called coralloid roots. Now, what are they? They are kind of pale white in color and irregularly shaped, negatively geotropic roots, which means they grow away from gravity. Okay, so around the cycas thallus, there will be extra roots that develop negatively geotropically, which means they grow vertically upwards from the soil. Okay, so negatively geotropic roots which have symbiotic association of cyanobacteria, nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria like nostoc and anabina. Okay, so this is about coralloid roots. So coralloid roots are pale, irregularly shaped, negatively geotropic roots, and they are meant for symbiotic association with nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria like nostoc and anabina. Clear? So this is one type of root in cycas. And in case of pinus, the roots have mycorrhizal association. So the roots are associated with fungi, mycorrhizal fungi. Okay, So the root system of pinus has mycorrhizal association. This is about root in pinus. Clear? So under roots, there are two special cases. One is coralloid root of cycas and mycorrhizal roots of pinus. Clear? So stem and leaf, there are different variations which we will see in the next class. Okay. All right. Thank you, students.
Thank you.